Evening all. Okay, I'm going to be carrying on from last week, looking at some Tal versus Botvinnik encounters from that 1960 match. Okay, so evening all. So let's see. In game 8 of the 1960 match, Mikhail Botvinnik was playing white against Tal. And at this stage in the match, from where we left off last week, it was 3-0 to Tal. And if you have the book Life and Games of Mikhail Tal, he talks about the content of the games not really matching the results. And in this game, he indicated he was playing quite recklessly. So let's see just how recklessly he was playing in this game. So Mikhail, instead of calling them both Mikhail, by the way, I think I'm going to use their surnames from now on, just to distinguish clearly. So Botvinnik playing white, Tal playing black. Tal's quite an easy surname anyway. So Botvinnik kicked off with d4. And one thing about Botvinnik's openings, they're kind of grippy, as in strategic grip. They've got this kind of grippy feel to a lot of them, which really suits Mikhail Botvinnik's style, I think. Whilst Tal doesn't mind, dynamic tactical imbalances. So there's a real clash of styles going on. But okay, so Tal plays knight f6, and we see c4, e6. So is this going to be a Nimzo Indian or a Queen's Indian? Knight f3 is played. And now Tal, instead of going into classic modern kind of Queen's Indian lines, plays actually c5, encouraging a kind of Benoni structure. The Benoni structure nowadays is not so favoured, I think, at high levels, even though it can often generate active positions. It's the structure which seems a bit suspect. So we see d5 after e takes, c takes, g6, knight c3, bishop g5, bishop g7, bishop g5, pinning that knight. So black's actually delayed d6 here quite considerably, but at any time white plays d6, black may just play knight c6, and it might not be such a big deal at all. So there's a temptation to play d6 here. It's ignored. Okay, so we see castling, and now Botvinnik plays e3, and this offers less of a target down that e file. The pawn on e3 is in many respects more solid than e4. It's not classic Benoni territory here, so it's more solid, this pawn structure in this position. Okay, rook e8 anyway. Now knight d2 is played. Okay, so knight d2, and let's see, is the knight heading for that classic c4 square to try and get into d6? Will black have to play d6 now? Yes, he does. d6, and we see bishop e2, and another advantage of having the pawn on e3 is that this bishop can protect d5 quite easily as well from f3 without the e-pawn getting in the way necessarily. a6, black wants to use this majority of pawns over here, pawn majority. White wants to stop that, so a4. Knight bd7, white castles. Queen c7. Okay, white enjoys a solid position, and one which he shouldn't be tactically crushed that easily. We see queen c2, and now knight b6, which, okay, it attacks d5, and the possibility of bishop f5 might be useful in some circumstances, but here actually it doesn't seem that effective after bishop f3. Protecting d5, bishop f5, maybe just e4. Now Tal indulges in c4, so this may be kind of the recklessness is starting, which he might have alluded to in his classic book. So c4, is that pawn slightly vulnerable? It is on that c file as a potential target. Botvinnik in this position voluntarily gives up the dark square bishop with bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, and he's not immediately trying for a tempo gainer with knight e4, but rather, well, he plays a5 first, okay, and now knight ce4, and now with this pressure it's quite annoying, and also this c pawn, of course, seems helpless here. So black is losing a pawn for nebulous compensation, it would seem. We see bishop e5, okay, pointing at white's king. Is it really enough? Queen takes c4, queen d8, as though the queen has dangerous intentions potentially. A very interesting move now was played by Botvinnik. The move queen a2, getting out of the way on the c file, still keeping an eye on d5, but it makes way for the knight to come in here, eyeing both b6 and d6. Okay, f5, quite committal for black to start moving these pawns, and Tal shows real aggression now on the king side with g5. He wants to kick this bishop and maybe use this h4 square. It's very crude, direct play here. But is it dangerous? Knight c4, g4. White really doesn't want to replace the bishop with a dangerous knight there. He just calmly retreats this bishop. And now we see queen f6. So for the moment it seems as though, what is this queen doing here? The knight is useful, potentially. b6 is a vulnerable square. Okay, we see knight a4 heading for that vulnerable square. Does black have an attack to work on here? Is it evolvable, this attack, with using, say, the g file? Maybe operations like this? Maybe, or is it far too slow? King h8. We see g3, just in case there's any sniff of f4 being useful. That's ruled out. It does weaken some light squares, but how can black use that? He plays h5 now, very aggressive stuff. Botvinnik reacts with f4. And now things get a little bit tactical, or quite a lot tactical. You see the surprise move, bishop d4. So some of Tal's magic here. If white took check, well, let's have a quick look. Check. And rook takes e2 will be nasty, potentially. So this has to be ignored, it seems. Botvinnik plays queen a3, double attacking an attack on d6 and defending e3 like this. So that looks pretty useful move in this position. Rook b8. Okay, and now the knight, one of the knights does occupy b6. h4, is this attack raging on now? Potentially this looks dangerous. Rook ad1, asking the bishop to move away. It actually takes on b6. And then we see a takes b6, leaving some pressure on d6 from the queen and the knight. Knight c5. Going in for that e4 square. It is a backward pawn on a semi-open file, so why not? Interestingly, Mikhail Botvinnik here, so I need to say the surname, both Mikhails, he actually takes on h4 here. If the queen leaves the diagonal there, maybe queen c3 is useful. Of course, knight d6 as well is the more important aspect, actually. It's tied down, so grabbing this pawn Seems safe enough in two respects at least. We see bishop d7, and now queen c3, getting the queens off actually, because it's the king's on h8 in any case. So white's material up. Is it going to be easy? Mikhail takes. After takes, bishop b5, so that knight can't move just yet. Let's pin on e2. Rook fe1, unpinning, threatening again. Knight d6, knight takes d6. We see knight e4. Does this have to be defended? It is. Rook bc8. Now knight a5. Annoyingly on b7. Bishop takes e2. Rook takes e2. Knight takes c3. And this doesn't look so bad all of a sudden. Especially if white played rook c2 here, rook e c2, there's knight e2 check. Neat little tactic. Because if takes, we take here. Otherwise we take here. That would be a neat little tactic. But actually, Botvinnik in this position played rook takes c3, sacrificing the exchange. He's getting lots of pawns. He takes on b7. He gives up e3 though, so it's just an exchange sacrifice now. Knight takes d6. Now after rook d3, we see knight f7 check. And here, Tal resigned. Let's just check out this final position. Is this really helped us for the rook? So say king g7 was played. So what would be the strongest continuation here? If I gave you all 20 seconds to look at this, what would be a very good continuation? Okay, starting from now. Anyone? Well, I think b7 looks very tempting. If the rook has to come back. This pawn's a runner, so is it so clear, this situation? Knight d8, actually. So any thoughts on this? a5, is this a winning continuation, or? Okay, white has this pawn over here as well to factor in. Does anyone want to do an engine check or anything? Simple? Want to play chess? Anyone? Okay, I should have checked this out earlier actually, because maybe I'm sorry about this, but this was the position where here black resigned. Okay, the engine indicates that actually in this position, okay, here d6, Oh, sorry, king f6, h5. Sorry, after king g7. So say king g7. What would be a good move here? 44. Oh, 44 d6. What about here in this position? In this position, is it b7? Right. Okay, so rook b3. Knight d8. So if king f6, I'm going to move d6 here. d6. Alright, so say a5, and this is the mystery for me. So here, after a5, what does white do here? I just wonder about this. Oh, this pawn is going with check on the king. You might have a point about h5. If d7, well, there's king e7. Okay. I'm sorry, d7. Flight commander on stream says d7, but we got king e7. We play d7, king e7. We've got this a pawn running, haven't we? Okay, knight c6. We just take. Is this knight really coming back? This looks dangerous because of this a pawn, this situation. Don't tell me h5 here. This pawn goes and stops this one. Just in time. It's fascinating. If we go back to this point where the resignation occurred, was it really that deep? Because it slightly knocked me back, this knight f7 check. It's actually in Tal's book. It's white who wins. Okay. If king h7 d6, if king g7, okay, this variation here. Oh, blimey. knight d6 in this position. Oh yeah, knight d6 is very clever in this position. So if rook takes, we've got b7, which stops the b5 square. That's good. Thanks, Shanghai. Okay, so simply knight d6 here. And if we go rook b3, what happens at rook b3 though? B7 is the best thing going. We just got a5. This can't be right because this pawn's really dangerous. So I think the other variations is more convincing actually. So if we go back to this final position, b7 or b3, knight d8, a5. So we've got here. Well, if king f6 here, d6, a5, d7, and this does mean that knight c6 for d8. So king e7, check, takes, win the rook, and it's check. So by a hair's breadth, because it's check, we now just win this race just about with h5. The race is won. Sorry about that, taking quite a bit of time on this one. Let's go on to the next game. So that was wow, complex. So in this game, let's go on to round 9. So in round 9, Mikhail Tal playing white played e4, and we saw c6, Caracan, and d takes e4, knight takes, and rock solid line, main line, bishop f5, retreated, bishop g6. Now Tal played interestingly knight 1 e2, as though the knight's got a prospect here to harass the bishop, and maybe also, you know, h4 h5 is interesting. So knight f6, h4 is indeed played, knight f4, and then bishop c4, eyeing that sensitive f7 square, e6. Okay, and white castles, even though he's got a slightly loose pawn here, castling on this side of the board, he's got his eye on e6 here from these two pieces. Bishop d6, and it's just so tempting here to take on e6, and this is exactly what Tal did. He took on e6, he keeps the king, it seems, in the center. It looks really dangerous. 2 pawns for the knight, king in the center. Doesn't it look quite dangerous? He's still got quite a few pieces. He's got all these other pieces. So queen c7, rook e1. Now the first surprising move now is not routinely, for example, moving the king. He actually plays knight bd7, inviting any discovered check, which is harmless here, now like this. But this other discovered check is used now, because otherwise, well, the king is now going to castle queenside. So this is a really powerful idea, knight bd7, just to try and castle queenside. Tal keeps the king in the centre with bishop g8, but he has invested a whole piece here. His knight investment. King f8, bishop takes, rook takes. Is it so clear, the attack now? Knight f5. Black's a piece up at the moment. G6. Okay, and he's playing G6 now, offering H6, kind of destabilizes his position. Offers H6. So King G8. Now another trade. Knight takes, queen takes. So has Tal burnt his boats a little bit? He's a piece down. The king now seems safe. Much safer than before. So bishop g5, okay. Now this rook can even come into the game and parry this e-file. So has white's attack actually run out of steam? Queen d3, the king protects g6. Now queen g3, just offering an exchange of queens, a piece down. First an exchange of rooks, then the queens come off. So a piece down for what? For just, okay, it's for three pawns, but these pawns are doubled here. This g4 square could be very useful for black in this position. We see now rook f8, and this not only parries rook e7 because now rook f7, but also knight g4 could be a real nuisance. c4, knight g4, and black now from move 25, it starts just neutralizing white. Let's see, d5 takes, knight df6, d6. The rook goes to guard this pawn and blockade. Now the king comes in, and now the bishop comes off the board here. King e6 is threatened. This looks terrible now. It's not so clear at all. White's attack has gone, and he's being munched in this ending. He's only now got 2 pawns for the piece. But okay, he's going, it seems, potentially for this g6 pawn now, and he's going to try and create an outside pass pawn, ideally. Check, check, check. Knight b4. The knight's kicked. Now h5, trying to create this outside passed pawn at move 40 now. And Botvinnik accepts that. He accepts it. He gives white that outside pass pawn. He puts a lock and key on these 2 pawns though with playing g5. Can this outside pass pawn here be used to distract the black king? h6, king f6, king d5. The king might try and make its way to win these 2 in the meantime. Okay, a4. King's going over there. Now king d5. Trying to, he's going to prepare to maybe do this. Okay, king b5. Delicate endgame play, taking this b pawn. King g6. If this king can just glide over here, he can come in like this. But this knight is a pain. Check. Now after g3, knight e2, actually white resigned here. Mikhail Tal was completely neutralized with that dangerous looking piece sacrifice he made early in the game. It looked so tempting here after bishop d6 to sacrifice with knight takes e6. Would you all agree this looks fairly tempting? If you're Mikhail Tal, you kind of, I suppose, get this reputation of being this fearsome attacking player, and we have this situation where Botvinnik's kind of played this bishop d6 just asking for knight takes e6. It just seems, on the surface, it seems really dangerous. It's only a knight for 2 pawns. So I don't know what you guys think of this one, but yeah, that's quite a grind after that. So with this win, it was now 3-2 in the match. Okay, with quite a few draws building up. Okay, so let's look at round 11 game now. In round 11. Okay. In round 11, I'll try and get the page in properly actually. Try that again. Try and get the page in. Okay. Okay, Tal playing white in game 11 against Botvinnik. So knight f3. So not an e4 opening. He's keeping a lot of tension in this game. And fianchettos, and we get a very solid play from white this time. So Tal actually playing this as though he's playing Botvinnik in his own opening in round 11. You might think, why switch openings like this? Well, maybe it was that rather depressing direct game that we just saw where the piece sack didn't work, which maybe annoyed him quite a bit. Okay, there's no notes. I'm just checking if there's any specific notes on this. C6, it's solid play, gripping squares on both sides. Okay, something has to be done here. D4, D5, bishop E2, bishop E6, very solid, locked in position. Knight BD2. Okay, black takes on D2, queen takes. Knight A6, and now we see rook AC1. So white's played, double fianchetto, keeping a lot of tension in position. Knight E5. Now rook FD1. So it looks solid enough, but now an energetic move, queen A5. So queenside pressure, kind of tying the knight down. That pawn might actually be on the cards if the knight moves. So black here plays D takes C4. We see knight takes C4. Queen goes back. The queen exchange is avoided. We see queen E1. And white now is getting a nice centre after E4. But it's double-edged. When you have a nice centre like this, it can be subject to attack. These are kind of potentially fragile pawns after bishop takes C4. We see actually rook takes C4. Okay, knight C7. For example, D4, this could become dangerous for D4. Bishop H3 though, and there's pressure on black across this diagonal. E6. And then bishop C1, going to soften up something over here. The bishop's going to come and annoy this rook over there. We see curious queen A8, radical. Botvinnik putting his queen right in the corner. Now, is he being positionally outplayed here? Or is this absolutely fine for black? Bishop G5, rook E8, queen D2, as though, hang on a sec, get rid of these bishops. F5, and bishop exchange is encouraged. Looks quite dangerous. It is taken. Rook E7. Rook E1. There's pins to exploit here. Taking. What's this queen doing over here? It looks ridiculous. This queen on A8 in this position. Is it going to come back in the game? Rook F8. Defending against things for a moment. Rook C5. Queen now shifts back to D8, and D4 looks like it's vulnerable. It seems. Does Mikhail want to come back to defend D4? Actually, he just plays rook e5. Okay, so he's got still the counter tactic. Well, if this was taken, he would have e takes and bishop takes. Looks on the cards here because of the doubling. Well, bishop takes looks possible. That looks possible. Okay, so in this position, rook ce5. We're on rook e5. The other rook couldn't do anything to get to e5. So rook g7 was played. d4 looks a little bit vulnerable, and also you might think, well, knight b5 as well. This pawn. What's happening with this pawn? Does it matter? Well, queen d2 goes back to protect that pawn. Queen d6, and this knight b5 might be on the cards here. Stopped bishop f1 to stop maybe knight b5. Rook d7 again. d4 is vulnerable, and queen takes e5 is threatened. E takes f5, protecting the rook with this one. Rook takes. Rook 5 to e4. But we have this seemingly good blockade square now on the isolated queen's pawn. It looks like an isolated queen's pawn, not so hot at the moment, or is it? E6 looks a bit of a target though. Actually, now we see h4, which means not just h5 to soften up the black king, but maybe bishop h3 coming up later. King g7, so h5, trying to soften up the black king position. That's taken. Rook h4. Okay, you can start working on this pawn as the next target. King g8, bishop d3, rook g7, and now rook e5. The rooks are coordinating like this on the h file. Look at this pressure building up. Treble pressure coming up. Treble. Everything now on h7, ganging up on h7 rather dramatically. Knight d5, but the queen now comes back. Maybe black is threatening just to evict with knight f6 and embarrass, for example. That could be dangerous. The queen came back. Knight f6. Okay, we can use h6 now. Queen d6, rook f4, queen f8, queen e3. And this is a bit of a grinding game, I gotta be honest. This is not the sort of game I think most annotators would be very, very keen on annotating. We're at move 42. Let's see, knight d5. Okay, queen e5 now. Queen c5. It's a long, bitter struggle now. But here, white combinationally wins a pawn here with bishop takes h7. So he's relying on this loose knight. He's going to pounce in here on a rook exchange. But first he plays a check. And now finally he uses this where he gets that knight. And he gets b7. So at the moment, white is 2 pawns up. Has black got enough check, perpetual check potential? Queen e4. There looks to be lots of check possibilities. Queen a6, check, check, check. Making progress. King e2, or is it check, 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 check? King a6. But now another pawn bites the dust. Queen takes c6. Are the checks going to run out? Giving up a2. But now look, the checks seem to be running out a bit. Well, it's still 2 pawns up. King gets out of the way of d5 check. d5 anyway. After takes check, check, Well, if king e5 there was f4, king couldn't have gone here. So still 2 pawns up. Queen a1. Check. Now king f4. It should be quite easy to convert this now. And in fact, after check here, king f6, black resigned. Okay, bit of a Titanic game, that one. 72 mover. And okay, these were kind of, yeah, some pretty grinding games tonight. Not as exciting as last week. I think okay, I hope you got something out of them. Thanks very much. Maybe see you next week. Thanks very much.